There's a specific kind of darkness that lives in old-growth forests. A darkness that feels heavier than just the absence of light. I know this because I once spent a night in a place that shouldn't exist, on a path that refused to let me go. It wasn't about getting lost. It was about being taken. The real horror began when I realized the trail I was on was no longer made of dirt and stone, but of something else entirely, something that was aware of me. My mistake was overconfidence. I'd hiked the trails of Pine Ridge for over a decade, and the 5-mile Lookout Point loop was practically my backyard. I started late in the afternoon, chasing the golden hour for some photography, telling myself I knew every twist and route like the back of my hand. The air was crisp, with the promise of autumn, and the woods felt welcoming, familiar. I reached the summit, took my pictures of the valley bathed in orange and purple, and turned back with plenty of what I thought was daylight left. The descent was always faster, but as the sun dipped below the ridge, the forest began to change. The familiar, friendly shadows of the pines grew long and distorted, clutching at the edges of the path. A chill set in that had nothing to do with the evening air. It was a subtle shift, like a single note in a symphony turning sour, a wrongness that prickled the hairs on my arms. The first clear sign was a trail marker, a simple blue blaze painted on an old oak. I'd passed it 100 times, except this time, as my headlamp beam caught it, the paint looked fresh, almost wet, and just beyond it, the path forked. It had never forked there before. I checked. My phone no signal, which was normal, and pulled out my compass. The needle quivered, spinning lazily before settling on a direction that felt completely wrong. I chose the left fork, the one that seemed to slope more steeply downhill, figuring it was the most direct route. The forest grew unnervingly quiet. No crickets, no rustling of small animals, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of my boots on the forest floor. 10 minutes later, I saw it again. The same oak tree, the same wet-looking blue blaze, the same impossible fork in the path. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my stomach. I hadn't circled back. I had been returned. I stopped, forcing myself to think logically. I was tired. It was dark. I was disoriented. I turned around, determined to retrace my steps, back to the summit. But the path behind me was gone. Not overgrown or hard to see, it was simply gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of thorny, tangled brush that hadn't been there moments before. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I was trapped. I pushed forward again, taking the right fork this time. The path seemed to narrow, the trees closing in, their branches weaving together overhead until the sky was completely blotted out. The beam of my headlamp felt small, swallowed by an oppressive darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. I started calling out, my voice sounding thin and pathetic. The only answer was a bizarre, faint echo that sounded less like my own voice and more like a mocking imitation of it. Then came the whispers. They were at the edge of my hearing, indistinct and layered, like dozens of people murmuring just out of sight. I'd stop, strain to listen, and they'd vanish, replaced by that suffocating silence. I kept walking for what felt like hours, my legs aching, my throat raw. The path never changed. It was an endless, winding corridor of black trees and whispering shadows. My headlamp started to flicker, the beam turning a sickly yellow. I knew. The batteries were fresh. It was the forest, the place itself, that was draining the life from everything within it. The climax of that night wasn't a creature leaping from the shadows. It was a moment of dreadful understanding. The path opened unexpectedly into a small, perfect clearing. In the center stood a single, massive boulder, one I'd never seen before. It was covered in carvings, but they weren't any symbols I recognized. They were deep, gouged-out spirals, all leading to the center of the stone. As my fading headlamp beam traced their twisted shapes, the whispering returned, louder now, coming from all around me, as if the trees themselves were speaking. It was a language of rustling leaves and snapping twigs, and yet I understood the intent. It was a hunger. The path had led me here. It was a lure, a digestive tract, and this clearing was the stomach. I saw a flicker of movement near the edge of the woods, a shape, tall and impossibly thin, that was darker than the darkness around it. It didn't have a face, but I felt it watching me, studying me. The air grew thick, vibrating with a low hum that resonated deep in my chest. This was it. I was a meal. In a final, desperate act, I turned away from the path, away from the watching shape, and plunged directly into the tangled, thorny brush that bordered the clearing. I don't remember much after that. I remember thorns tearing at my clothes and skin, the feeling of falling, and then a profound, peaceful blackness. I woke to the blare of a truck's horn and the harsh glare of headlights. I was lying in a ditch on the side of the main highway, a good 10 miles from the Pine Ridge trailhead. My gear was shredded. I was covered in scratches, but I was alive. The truck driver who found me said I'd just appeared out of the woods. The police were called. A search party was organized, but they found nothing. No strange clearings, no carved boulders, no path that went nowhere. It doesn't exist on any map. I haven't been back to those woods since. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can almost hear it. That faint, whispering sound, calling me back to the trail that waits for me in the dark. Hope can be a dangerous thing. It can be a pinprick of light in an ocean of black, a beacon that promises safety and warmth. But when you walk towards that light for hours, through an endless night, and it never gets any closer, hope curdles into a very specific kind of poison. You realize the light isn't a promise. It's the bait in a trap that has no walls and no ceiling. A trap made of nothing but distance and darkness. The road I was on wasn't on the map. It was a shortcut my GPS offered to shave an hour off a cross-country drive that had already taken 2 days. For the first 20 minutes, it was fine as simple. Straight ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through endless flat fields. Then, my car died. No sputtering, no warning light, just a sudden and complete silence as the engine cut out and I rolled to a stop. My phone, of course, had no service. I was surrounded by a darkness so total that it felt like a physical substance. The sky, a starless, obsidian lid, pressed down on the world. In the far distance, I saw it. One single, yellow light. A farmhouse, I thought. A lifeline. I grabbed my water bottle and a jacket, locked the car, and started walking. The air was still, and the silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of my own footsteps on the gravel shoulder. The light seemed maybe a mile or two away, an easy walk. That was my first miscalculation. An hour of walking past, my pace steady and determined, and the light remained exactly where it was, distant, unwavering speck. It didn't grow, it didn't shrink, it didn't flicker. It was a fixed point in a world that had seemingly begun to stretch around me. I stopped and looked back. The road was perfectly straight, yet my car was gone, swallowed by the darkness behind me as if it had never existed. A knot of unease tightened in my gut. I was standing on an infinite road between a past that had vanished and a future I could not reach. On either side of me, the field stretched into blackness, filled with a tall, swaying crop I couldn't identify. I kept walking, telling myself it was a trick of the flatland, an optical illusion. Then the other sound started. It was a faint, rhythmic scraping noise, coming from somewhere out in the field to my right. She-thump like something heavy, something with immense friction, was being dragged through the dry soil. It kept pace with me, never getting closer or farther away. I'd stop, and it would stop. I'd start walking again, and the sound would resume its dreadful, patient rhythm. My mind started to fray. Was I even moving? Or was the landscape scrolling past me like a theatrical backdrop? I shouted, and the sound was swallowed instantly by the oppressive emptiness. No echo, no reply. Only the incessant, maddening she-thump from the darkness to my right. The light ahead seemed to mock me. It wasn't a farmhouse. It was too steady, too perfect. Panic began to set in. The road felt like a trap, and whatever was in that field was its warden. I had to get off this path. In a moment of what I can only call desperate insanity, I veered off the asphalt and plunged into the dense rows of crops, hoping to cut across the field and escape the sound. The moment my feet left the road, everything changed. The ground was soft and spongy, unnaturally so. The scraping sound stopped. In its place, a new sound began, a soft, wet clicking, and it was coming from multiple directions, just ahead of me. The stalks of the plants weren't dry like corn. They were slick and vaguely pliant, brushing against my skin like cold fingers. I pushed through the last row of stalks and stumbled into a small, circular clearing. The moon, which had been absent all night, now cast a pale, sickly illumination from directly overhead. In the center of the clearing, I saw the source of the noise. A deep furrow, a trench, was being carved in the soil before my very eyes, extending itself without a plow or a person guiding it. And then I saw them. Standing over the furrow were 3 figures. They were impossibly tall and thin, their limbs like bent reeds. They had no faces, just smooth, pale surfaces where a face should be. They were the source of the clicking noise, their long, spindly fingers probing the fresh earth, planting small, pulsating, organic-looking objects into the trench. They were farmers. They were tending this alien landscape. As I stood there, frozen in utter terror, one of them straightened up, its whole body moving with a fluid grace that was deeply, horribly wrong. It turned its blank head towards me. It saw me, and I knew, with a certainty that turned my blood to ice, that I was a weed in their garden. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the feeling of pure, animal terror as I turned and ran, crashing back through the fleshy, slick stalks, not caring about the direction. I burst out of the field, and my feet hit hard asphalt. I fell, scraping my hands and knees. When I looked up, I was there, right next to the driver's side door of my car. The engine was running. I didn't question it. I scrambled inside, slammed the door, and stomped on the gas. The car shot forward. I risked one glance in my rearview mirror. The field was just a field. The road was just a road. But high in the sky, exactly where the farmhouse light had been, was a single, unblinking yellow star that didn't belong to any constellation I knew. There are worse things than being lost in the wilderness. You can get lost in a place built by human hands, a place that's supposed to be a home. You can find yourself in a labyrinth of pristine asphalt and manicured lawns where every path leads back to where you started. You drive down the same street a dozen times, but you only realize it's the same street when you see your own tire tracks still fresh in the dew. That's when the real panic sets in. You're not just lost in a neighborhood, you're trapped in the blueprint. I was driving for a food delivery app to make ends meet, and the late-night shifts were always the most lucrative. The order that came in around 2 a.m. was a big one, with a tip to match, but the destination was a brand new development on the edge of town I'd never heard of, Somerset Meadows. My phone's GPS led me off the main highway and onto a series of newly paved roads that cut through what used to be farmland. As I passed under a large, ornate sign welcoming me to the neighborhood, my GPS signal died. The map on my phone froze. showing my car as a blue dot in a blank, unlabeled gray space. I figured I'd just follow the street signs. The address was 1422 Serenity Drive. The problem was, every single street I turned onto was named Serenity Drive. At first I thought it was a developer's quirk, a mistake. But after the fourth identical street sign, a cold unease began to creep over me. The neighborhood was a ghost town. Every house was a perfect two-story colonial, painted in the exact same shade of muted beige. Each lawn was a flawless green square, each driveway empty. The only light came from the sterile, orange glow of the streetlights, spaced at mathematically perfect intervals. I found house number 1422, parked, and walked to the door. The windows were dark, and the doorbell echoed in a way that told me the house was completely empty. No one was home. Frustrated, I got back in my car to leave, but the labyrinth had closed around me. Every turn, every cul-de-sac, fed me back onto another Serenity Drive, past another row of identical, vacant houses. My low-fuel light had been on for a while, and now the needle was kissing empty. Panic began to bubble in my chest. I was driving in circles, burning the last of my gas, in a perfectly rendered, completely soulless prison. That's when I started noticing the lights. Here and there, a single upstairs window would be lit, a faint, yellow square in the black facade of an otherwise dead house. It gave me a flicker of hope. As I drove past one, I glanced up and saw a shadow move past the window, a tall, slender silhouette. A moment of relief washed over me. People did live here. Then I passed another lit window on another street, and I saw it again. The same silhouette, moving in the exact same way, and again, and again. It was in every lit window, a silent, repeating sentinel in a neighborhood that was fundamentally wrong. My car engine sputtered and died directly under the buzz of a streetlight, plunging me into a terrifying silence. I was out of gas, stranded. My phone was a useless brick. Staying in the car felt like waiting in my own tomb. My only choice was to approach one of the houses with a light on. I picked one across the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. The lawn felt strangely stiff under my feet, like astroturf. The air was cold and still, carrying the scent of fresh paint and something else. Something sterile, like a hospital. As I reached the concrete walkway, I looked up at the lit window, my hand half raised to knock, and what I saw broke my mind. The window wasn't a window into a room, it was a screen. It was displaying a live feed of the street behind me, shot from a high angle. The image was grainy, and the color was washed out. I could see my car parked under the streetlight. I could see myself, a small, pathetic figure, standing on the lawn, staring up. As I watched this impossible image of myself, a sound cut through. The silence from the house next door, a house I had presumed was as dark and empty as the rest. It was the distinct, metallic clack of a deadbolt being thrown. I turned my head, and the front door of that dark house began to swing inward, opening onto a void of pure, featureless black. It wasn't a hallway, it was an absence, an invitation to step out of this fake world and into whatever lay beyond it. I didn't accept. I ran. I abandoned the neat, paved roads and cut across the perfect, plastic lawns. I vaulted the identical white fences, my breath sobbing in my chest. The neighborhood seemed to stretch on forever, a repeating pattern of beige and green under that sickly orange sky. I just kept my eyes forward and ran until the houses suddenly stopped. There was no transition, no buffer zone. One moment I was on a lawn, the next my feet hit soft earth, and I was crashing through a line of unseen trees. I tumbled through the undergrowth and fell onto the gravel shoulder of a highway. The roar of a passing semi-truck, shocking me back to reality. I looked back. There was no Somerset Meadows, no ornate sign, no rows of beige houses. There was just an empty, moonlit field. According to my phone, which now had full service and a full battery, It was 2:15 a.m. I had been gone for less than 30 minutes.